No, my internet is not a Bears fan, Sean, and it stinks. But hopefully things come back online here fairly soon. Great. Let's see. Could be the weather. Let me throw on a jacket. We'll see if going outside can fix anything. At this point, I'm down to try anything. But let's see. Okay, so what about right? Welcome to my Dallas, Texas apartment. But so, anyways, let's see if this works any better. So, let me know. Ooh, it's dark. Let's take a look around. I bet I could find some kind of a light. But so, oh, MVP of the defense. That's a great question. The answer for me would be Roquan Smith, without a question. By the way, is this audio quality any better? At some point, I'm just kind of sitting around waiting for the internet to come back on. But but so, anyways, let me see. Okay, audio quality is better. That's good to hear. Which I mean, hey, we'll start somewhere, right? But so, anyways, somebody talked about, or like, MVP. To me, the answer is Roquan Smith. He has been everywhere. In this game, Pagano blitzed him a whole lot more, and he was able to, ravage the opposing defense, even opening up Khalil Mack for that safety, which was a really phenomenal call by Chuck Pagano. I love the fact that they were sending Roquan Smith more because in the past they tend to. No, it's from sprinklers, Derek. Now we're outside, and I'll tell you, it's definitely cold in Texas, but it's not Chicago cold. It's about 30 degrees out here, so nothing crazy. I'll tell you what, Sean, Robert Quinn has not been playing well. And in this game, it definitely was a little worse, or it wasn't worse. This game, he got held a couple of times, almost got home on a stun. His luck would have it, he did not get the sack. And I totally agree with what anybody else would say. Like, I am not going to try to defend Robert Quinn like crazy. Best thing, damage thing Brad Biggs talked about, but the Nagy immediately refuted it. So, heck if I know anything. But so, oh, Johnny Quinn, the bobsledder. Well, heck, I don't know anything about him. But so, as far as how the defense has worked, I know the defense has started. What is it? The defense has been focused on coverage for a whole lot of the year, and Jalen Johnson and Kyle Fuller have had their moments. I mean, Fuller's been about as good as I've just about ever seen him. But I think Roquan Smith at inside linebacker, covering receivers, blitzing players, blowing up screens, kind of doing it all. Right now he's got like 124 tackles, which, look, I'm not a volume stats kind of guy. It takes a little more than that to impress me, but I know that Roquan Smith has like the 7th lowest passer rating against out of, I don't even think it's linebackers. I think it might be like 4th lowest passer rating against 4 linebackers, but I'd have to look at the stats to really know. I just know that if Roquan Smith catches that pick against New Orleans and takes it back all the way, I think that he's an all-pro. Like, that's not a question in my mind. If he wins that New Orleans game for the Bears, I don't think that there's any question on whether or not he's being voted into All-Pro. I think it just happens. But that's just my take. I think Mack has been good. I think Mack has kind of been the only player on the defensive line, which is sad to say because I would have expected a little more out of Hicks, but I think Hicks is being shut down by double teams and not playing next to Goldman, who I got to tell you, I think I devalued a little bit just how much attention Goldman draws and allows for single blocks. Nichols has been awesome, Elon. I'm not trying to dog on Bilal Nichols. I think he's a great rotational lineman and frankly, like, plays with a lot of, or was it heart, passion, like, you could say all the soft stuff, but even more so is that he's a very solid one-gapping defensive lineman, plays well against the run, and as we saw, he got a sack, which, that was a little hustle, too. Like, his man just kept blocking him to his right, but he found a lane and worked through it. Where I think the Bears really stood out on Sunday was they were able to contain Deshaun Watson in that second half, shut down receiving weapons, and pressure the passer. What was it? They came away with 7 sacks. Did I hear that correctly? Do I have the number correctly? Like, especially in the second half, they started dominating. I think one of the major turnaround plays, if there was a defensive play of the game that I was going to talk about, or probably player of the game, it's absolutely Khalil Mack, and I can tell you exactly why. Khalil Mack started the game off strong with that arm tackle fumble against. It reminds me of the Julius Peppers Calvin Johnson fumble from like 2013 or something. But he was able to cause a fumble on, I believe it was Duke Johnson, and just rip the guy off of rip the ball out of the guy's arms, and immediately the Bears recovered it, and they didn't do much with it, but the Bears were able to establish that like intensity, and the defense wasn't going anywhere, and the whole all that mental stuff about like making your presence known, establishing an impact. Mac did that, and then he immediately followed it up with a safety. Or not immediately, it was a little later in the game, but Mac was able to make those impact plays. He was causing pressure. He was terrorizing Deshaun Watson, and I think that deserves like a tip of the hat, because there have been a whole lot of games where Roquan stood out, other games where Kyle Fuller stood out. We've even seen Trevathan have some solid games in run blocking, but this was a game where I thought Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks really stepped it up a notch. Hicks started out strong with a couple of and it wasn't a tackle for loss. It was technically a tackle for no gain, but even so, they were able to stuff the run. Hicks was a big part of that. Mack was a big part of that, and I mean, especially on one-on-one blocks, he has been nothing short of a terror. On offense, what was interesting is, like I was kind of talking about when we were actually able to look at footage, the Bears were able to get just about whatever they wanted, and especially did that through the air. The Bears wanted to victimize the Texans' man and zone coverage schemes, and they smoked them. Like they were rolling. What was cool was, in this game in particular, the Bears were able to buoy a lot of what Mitch likes to do, like the press conference that Mitch had recently, where he talked about the things that he liked in an offense. It's true. I mean, the Bears were able to call a lot of play action for Mitch, and all they really needed was that one run from Montgomery, and bang, the whole play action threat. Like, the Texans were buying it and 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 buying it. Every single time the Bears threw out the play action, you had all the Texans defenders, like usually somewhere between 3 or 4 Texans defenders, taking that extra step in towards the runner, and then Mitch was able to, in many cases, take a look at the deep stuff and throw it really short. In tons of those play actions, Cole, interesting question. You asked about, look, was this game good Bears or bad Texans? I think the answer is yes. You can only play the people in front of you in any situation, and I certainly think that the Bears played really well. But I also think that the Texans definitely helped out the Bears. I think the Texans' defense reminded me a little too much like the Lions, where Mitch was able to make a 20-yard throw downfield that was contested, and Allen Robinson brought it down there in the end of the second half, and that was awesome. I would never say that throw was somehow bad, because it was great. But most of the other throws Mitch made were within about 10 yards, and he executed them really well. Again, no disrespect, no shame in that. He played well in terms of what he was asked to do as a quarterback, but I worry about how he is able to, or how well he's going to be able to duplicate that performance against a Vikings defense that, I mean, as we saw, it influenced Foles' worst game of the season, and I thought Foles just, the more I've looked at it, there were some things Foles did all right in that game, but I would agree with anybody who'd say it. He didn't do enough, though he didn't exactly have, or he had one nice run, some running back. Well, it'll be interesting to see Mitch against this defense. I'm legitimately excited, because all of the other games that all the other games Mitch has played have been against the 14th or worst, and 14th in this case was Atlanta, defense by DVOA, and the Vikings, I think they had them at 12th now, but they were 9th last I checked before the Tampa Bay game, and I think that's relevant. Top 10 DVOA defense is a legitimately good defense any way you slice it, at least above average. Harrison Smith on the team, Eric Kendricks is playing great football. Gary, the dark screen is because we are outside. So whatever we want to look at, let me see if I can get a light going, because there is a light, but I don't know how to turn it on, which is hilarious. But we will see. Yeah, exactly like you're saying, DJ. The bright side about this Bears game is that this formula that the Bears used isn't that ridiculous. Like, plenty of teams have used it before. I can't clap my hands action because I am holding my phone with one of them. But so or this idea of like hit the opposing team with a hardcore or hard-nosed tough running game and let your quarterback throw over the opponent through play action is not new. Frankly, it's very what would you guys say, like 1995, 2000, 2005, like that's older school football. Maybe not like all the way back to 1980s. Honestly, I don't know what those game plans looked like, but this idea of like not making Mitch do too much, it's really not ridiculous. The trouble is that Mitch needs to improve as a deep passer. So we're going to see if he's able to do that, because personally what I thought was that, again, personal opinion, the trouble here is that the Texans didn't do a very good job of making Mitch beat them. They allowed a lot of those throws underneath. The Bears were able to the Bears were able to allow Mitch 3 to 4 seconds in many cases on these play action looks to look down the field and then just chuck the ball out sideways and work from there. A lot of those guys were able to catch the ball, turn around, and get some yards after catch. And somebody mentioned Cole Kmet getting the tough run of the week. I think he totally earned it. I mean, he fought through, I think, 4 guys ultimately when it was all said and done, and was able to make some serious plays. And I know, right, Andrew? I mean, what stunk is it's not a power outage, because, again, I just don't know how to turn on my outside lights. It's more that if I'm getting better signal out here, I'm not going to go inside. But it looked as if we had a major internet outage, and we can go check on that here in a second. I just don't want to fritz out the stream. Where I thought Kmet really stood out was his blocking. We saw this against Detroit. We saw this we saw this against Detroit. We saw this against the Texans. In many cases, Cole Kmet's getting experience blocking edge rushers. So like J.J. Watt, and in the Lions case, I honestly have no idea. But so the Bears were able from there to get Cole Kmet that experience in blocking high-profile opponents. And it's not like he was amazing. It's not like Kmet's, a backup offensive lineman or something like that. But what he was able to do was buy time and get good looks and good work against quality defensive players. And from there, from there he was able to help the Bears protection, kind of protect Sam Mustipher and Alex Bars, make sure that they weren't out of, or make sure that they never got into a situation where they were in one-on-one or a one-on-one against a particularly good defensive lineman, because nobody would really want that. And then he was also able to make some plays receiving with the ball in his hands, some yaks, some contested catches downfield, and obviously that Warrior-style run. It's great to see what he's doing in a Bears uniform right now, and he is certainly, I don't know if he's like, okay, so it's hard to say whether or not Cole Kmet is quote-unquote living up to the billing of that second-round pick, because a lot of people freak out about what that means, which is hilarious. Because they'll take a second-round pick and they'll be like, the guy needs to be Alshon Jeffrey. The guy needs to be Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool is an extremely good pick out of the second round. Jalen Johnson is an extremely good pick out of the second round. Cole Kmet is a good pick out of the second round. At least I think so. Is he, like, bad? That's not fair. Is he mediocre? We don't really know yet. But at the moment, he is moving the ball about as well as you would want a late-season rookie tight end to do so. And he's making the contested catches that are thrown at him, sans the one where he almost got concussed. And that's about all I could ask for him. If he can finish the season somewhere around 220-ish yards, I'm hopeful that he blossoms into a Kyle Rudolph-style player. I really don't ever think that Cole Kmet is going to be an explosive superstar on the Chicago Bears, but I do think that he can take Jimmy Graham's role of end zone threat away from him in the future. I think he can be a solid blocker, a solid receiving weapon, and potentially up to around like a 500, 600 yard receiver, again, if he takes that next step that's so common for NFL tight ends. So, that's the thing. So Elon said, no Travis Kelce, and I mean, no. I mean, the trouble with Travis Kelce and Zach Ertz is that they are so unbelievably special in how they move. Their movement is so fluid that honestly they might as well be like big wide receivers. Somebody mentioned Gronkowski. Gronkowski's more in the mold of what you would hope that a Kmet-style guy who's very straight line, not exactly agile in the way that he makes his cuts would be, but Gronkowski's a big ass and he's a big person, and I don't think Kmet's quite that large, though I mean I could be wrong and have been wrong before, but hey, we'll see. at least at the moment, again, if Kmet can be, or if Cole Kmet can become a Kyle Rudolph type, I will take it, because that is a perfectly fine value out of the second round. Again, home run, probably not, but single double, sure. And I'm all about good draft picks that are helpful. So somebody talked about Sam Mustipher. I think that's a good question. Sam Mustipher is, in my opinion, your ideal depth center. He seems to be getting the Bears in position to, or he seems to be helping the Bears. And remember, a center is a very cerebral position. He's basically the quarterback of the offensive line. And he's doing a great job of getting the line in position. They don't seem to be, missing a whole bunch of blocks, which is great. But in terms of like Sam's actual playing ability, I think that bigger, especially power rushers, think like Eddie Goldman and Akeem Hicks and so on and so forth, tend to saw Mustipher open. He got blown back a couple times, like blown back all the way into the pocket past Mitch. And that's not exactly exciting, but remember, he's a backup center. Like, he's without a doubt holding his water as a backup player, and he's definitely outperforming what I expected of him, where I thought he was just a practice squad body. He's been a lot better than that. As you guys can see, he's been a lot better than Alex Bars at playing center for the first time in his life. Cody Whitehair, who doesn't really like playing center, or at least it seems that way. He's been quick off his snap, he's been getting into position, but in terms of actual power blocking, like core strength, upper body stuff, not as much as you'd like to see from a starter, but he's a backup, so you can give him some grace. I think Alex Bars is not playing quite at Mustipher's level. I think Bars has been much more replaceable, but like you guys are talking about, I mean, Mustipher's somebody, in my opinion, you try James Daniels back at center. I don't think you kick Daniels over to right guard immediately. I think right guard's easier to replace. So if it was me, again, I would try Daniels at center and then move over and then try to find a replacement right guard in the same draft. And maybe you're looking for up to 2 replacement tackles. But, I mean, I don't really know. At that point, we're talking about almost preference and what falls to us in the draft, but it's hard to know. At the moment, Mustipher is more than holding his water. I have nothing but good things to say about him in his role, and the only time where I start to point out his negatives, and the only reason I do, is because I hear people talking about Mustipher as the center of the future, and I don't necessarily think that is the case. Now, let's dip back into my apartment and check on the internet router. So let's take a look, because if I can get out of the cold for a little. Right. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Yes. Are things better now? I saw y'all saying that the internet connection went out again, which is bad news for my feet, but good news for the stream, I guess. So are we all back and black screened and great? Okay, perfect. We're back to exactly where we were. That's my thumbs up silhouette. Let's see if I can get that in the picture at least. So obviously this is a weird stream. Thank you guys for dealing with me, but I don't plan these outages either. But let me see. Oh no, DJ, I completely understand. Like I didn't expect it to get this cold either. It's kind of like an annual thing, where biannual. One year it's about 50 degrees, the next year it's about 20, and we get snow every other. So Texas is weird that way. Certainly you think it's almost Californian in terms of its heat level. It's not. It's a little more desert than that, but I'll survive because I love you guys and I want to talk Bears. So that's exactly what we'll do. We'll just keep doing this as best as we can. But so let's see, where were we? So we were talking about, I think, like offensive line, do we re-sign Mitch and so on and so forth. And guys, that question's really tough. Like the trouble that I've seen, and I'm going to say this, and I hope you guys give me the time to explain what I mean, because I think it's right. Where Mitch is succeeding at the moment is an offense that if you asked most offensive coordinators what are the Bears doing, they're running very high school level concepts like one and done reads, occasionally a second read, 2 to 3 seconds on these rollouts and play action passes to give the quarterback a chance to watch to watch what he's doing and go from there. But hey, he's succeeding on them, certainly against the Texans and the Lions, and I'm not upset about it. Against the Packers, it didn't go so well, and part of that's because the Packers are able to not only generate some pressure, which Mitch is not outstandingly good at handling, and the Packers were able to take away, options downfield. Let me see, Mac Jones making, oh yeah, I definitely think Mac Jones makes more reads than Trubisky, but again, this is just what I am seeing. The complicated thing about, again, like this Mitch and Chicago Bears offense is that most of these plays offer one option where the play callers have made the assumption that they can understand what the defense they're about to see is going to look like and go from there. If that sounds weird, remember that they use a whole lot of motion keys to try to determine whether the opposing defense is in man or in zone. And in many cases, depending on the opposing lineup, they're able to make the assertion of whether or not the defense that they're seeing is going to be like a cover 3 zone or a cover 2 zone or a cover 4 zone. Just depending on the way that players get lined up, they can tend to make that kind of assertion, and it can go pretty well. So in this case, the Bears were able to do that. And they were able to do so really, really, really successfully. I mean, take the A-Rob 3-yard touchdown. The Bears were able to read exactly what kind of zone it was going to look like. A-Rob dipped right behind his guy. Mitch sustained, I think, a little bit of pressure and delivered the throw. He was only looking at his one guy, just like me when I play Madden. I mean, I'm watching the first guy that I see, but he did it. And he did it really well. And again, it's complicated, right? It's like, do I criticize him for not, quote unquote, being an NFL quarterback? Do I criticize him for having 2.9 completed air yards? Do I criticize him for only intending to complete about 4.2 air yards per throw? Which, in case you were wondering, that means that on average, the ball traveled a little over 4 yards downfield per throw. But I don't think so. I don't think I'm going to criticize him for it. I'm just going to caveat that this was an extremely good performance, just like the Bears' performance against Dallas, that I don't know if it needs to reset our expectations. Does that make sense? Like, again, it's funny. So Andrew says, I would criticize an NFL quarterback for not doing NFL quarterback things. And, you know, I'd agree with you if there wasn't this question right now around the NFL about, like, what is an NFL quarterback? Is it Tom Brady, who stands in the pocket and delivers? Well, that's more Nick Foles, right? Who won a game off of an audible with that rub-rub call against Tampa Bay. But as we saw, Nick Foles in that old school, Nick Foles in that old school model doesn't necessarily work if your offensive line can't protect worth a darn. And the Bears certainly weren't able to when Foles was in the game, and he didn't deliver on a lot of the chances that he did have. We went back to Mitch. We played some of the easier defenses on the schedule, and right now things look like they're rolling. I have no idea whether or not they're going to continue to roll. Again, like, I could sit here and be some kind of a doomsayer, oh, this won't work against Vikings. And don't get me wrong, it probably won't. But I also won't be surprised at this point with the offensive line playing a lot better than the last time we faced the Vikings if the Bears are going to produce more on offense than the 13 points, if they got 13 points. No, they did. Than the 13 points they're able to generate with Foles last time at Soldier Field. Couple the fact that they're going to be on artificial turf, and it won't surprise me if it's a pretty up and down game, though maybe not as up and down as this one or the Lions. So in terms of, like, what will happen against the Vikings, heck, I don't know. Like, this Bears team has been a surprise around every corner. No, I didn't actually see 5-1 coming. I know I said on Twitter, like, ooh, the Bears could start 6-0, but did I actually see them, like, winning those first 5 games? Or not first 5, but like 5 out of the first 6? Ooh, I don't know. I thought they were going to win 4. Then did I see them sliding and losing the next 6 straight? I definitely did not. I thought that we would beat at least one of the Rams, the Saints, and Tennessee, and certainly the New Orleans game came close, but I didn't expect them to get blown out of the water by Los Angeles and Tennessee, and they did. Especially given the way things were going, I didn't think we were going to lose to the Vikings, and we did. So then, of course, as soon as I think that all hope is lost, they come out here, they just gutted the Texans. And granted, the Texans are not a very good team and have been overperforming over the last couple of weeks, certainly slew the Lions on Thanksgiving and played well but not amazingly against Indianapolis. Even so, I thought that they'd do better than a game where, like somebody said in the comments section a little while ago, that people calling for like Deshaun Watson to get sat for his own protection, like that's a dominant football game. That's about as good a showing as you could ask for. That was not a game that I saw coming. And so at this point, like you're saying, Jediah, or like I do think that the game that will haunt the Bears for the playoff push is going to be that Lions game, in my opinion. The game that is going to haunt the Bears in terms of the tank for a quarterback situation is going to be this one, the Texans game, that they didn't have to win, or any of the comebacks that they had earlier in the season, but we don't need to get into that attitude if y'all don't want to. The point is that this season right now seems to be trending towards the dead center, and if the Bears can beat the Vikings, that will go a long way towards, what would you call it? That'll go a long way towards them making the playoffs, because if they win all 3, Arizona just has to lose one of their games, and the Bears are probably in. Now, they can't lose 2, and they can't lose this Vikings game, or the Vikings are just as much in the thick of it as the Bears are, and that's that would be a bit of a challenge, especially giving Arizona the ability to lose one. But that's the thing. He's saying, can we beat the Vikings? I mean, sure. The Vikings are surprisingly up and down. The Vikings don't have great cornerbacks, and so they could easily fall victim to a great outing by Mooney, Robinson, or Miller. But can Mitch deliver on those? Like, maybe. It's super weird, right? It's like the Vikings are just so up and down. What was it, a couple weeks ago, they were, and granted it was like quite a couple weeks ago, they were gunning people with a running attack that was just devastating. But the Bears are actually pretty good at stomping, or like snuffing out the run, so maybe that's not so scary. Well, will the Vikings be able to make use of a play action attack that like snares the Bears defenders into positions they don't want to be in and gets the ball to Adam Thielen? I mean, we'll see. Will the Bears offense be able to move the ball against a Vikings defense that I think has quite a good couple of decent pieces on it? And again, they have some holes. But the Bears quarterbacks exploiting holes at opposing cornerback has not been a good matchup over the last, I'd say, 3 years. You go all the way back to the 2018 matchup where the Philadelphia Eagles beat us in the playoffs, and you can say that Bears quarterbacks are not very good at opposing cornerbacks and getting the ball to the receivers. I won't expect that to change just yet, but I'm willing to be pleasantly surprised if Mitch does manage to do it. Now, hang on with me. I'm going to go grab a charger for my phone because, surprise, surprise, I just got a notification. We're sitting at about 2% battery, and I do want to keep this conversation going. So go ahead and get some comments in, talk to each other, and hopefully the internet's back on. I have no idea if y'all can hear me. No idea. But, me, I believe. Let's see. Oh, no way. What a hilarious time for a full-scale Spectrum internet outage, right? Cosmo says mew.
Well, it's because I locked him in here.
Oh. Mew.
So he doesn't run out the door.
All right. I've got a charger, so we're going to go find an outside outlet and see what we can do here. Thanks for hanging with me, guys. Or, sorry, for bearing with me. Not the stream I wanted, but the stream we get. I'm trying to stop him. My cat's rambunctious, and we're not allowed to take him outside, and he keeps trying to sneak outside because he's a cat. Yeah, I know, 0 out of 10, right, Akusai? I'm trying to get this thing closed, and it got caught on something. All right, so let's find the internet outage that's out, or outlet that's out here, get the phone plugged in, and things are gonna switch over from my headphone set to my just outdoor audio mic. Can y'all hear me okay? I'm sure that the quality changed a little bit, but hopefully it didn't change too much. No, I can't catch a break. But Andrew, just for you guys, I keep fighting, so on and so forth. Perfect, good to hear. So yeah, we'll get nice and cozy. Chat, make sure you let anybody know. Ooh, this is funny. Okay, so this is my poor cat who's just sitting here, just waiting here, just trying to get outside, and he can't get out here, but there's old Cosmo. But so, yeah, no, right? Thankfully, Level Up, we tend to have like a really long 1% there at the end, but hey, there you go. But so, or somebody asked what's going on. My internet here in Dallas had a full-scale outage, meaning that I am outside where I get the best, where I get my best signal just talking about the Bears, because that's what we've got going on here, right? Somebody talked about, what is it, somebody talked about the offensive line and like analysis of the offensive line since Ifedi moved to right tackle, and it's funny you say that, because I would tell you guys that I think the Bears offensive line has been dramatically better. Still not necessarily good, but Whitehair's been able to make some impact blocks in the running game, which, let me tell you guys, like, the Bears running game has had almost no impact blocks the entire season. And to be clear, when I say impact blocks, I mean a guy not only getting his man, but pushing him backwards and actually creating a hole. The Bears have been decent about trap blocks, especially in the very, very early season, and those are plays where, I'm trying to draw with my hands, where if the center moves like over here and then the guard moves over there and they open up that running hole, just like you saw on the Tariq Cohen carry at the very start of the season, you don't necessarily need to make like a power block. You don't need to make an impact block, and you can create a nice little hole. But most of the Bears' holes, if you guys go back and watch, have come more from the opposing defense losing gap integrity than they have the Bears' offensive line opening up the lane. So compare that to a running back making a nice play off of a bent run, like we talked about with Montgomery earlier in the night, more so than Cesar Ruiz on the Saints rolling around and smoking somebody in off of that like play, or that toss crack action that they like to use. But so anyways, all this to say, what the Bears have done is, so imagine, and do we have any baseball fans in here? Do we have any baseball fans in the chat? I'm sure we do. So you guys know how there's always that choice between a contact hitter who doesn't hit power much, solid average, solid on base percentage, but his slugging percentage is terrible, versus a power hitter that doesn't get on base much, bad on base percentage, but he's got a decent slugging percentage overall. Well, the latter is Coward, like in the very, 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 very extreme sense. When Coward does get a hold of his guy, he might have a shot at an impact block, but he blows way too many plays, like way too many plays, and the Bears offensive line suffers for it a lot, seems very out of position. Bars and Mustipher are the contact hitter, not a ton of slugging. They're not going to go well against like a Jeffrey Simmons from Tennessee, who, if you guys remember, ate Bars' lunch, as did Vita Vea. But they're going to be able to get the job done against medium to lower tier NFL defensive linemen, which, granted, there aren't like a ton of those, but at the same time, there are enough to where Bars and Mustipher can, at the end of the day, like, make enough plays, more just cat footage, because I think it might be a little more interesting than looking at my darkness-shrouded face. But or what is it? The Bears are able to make more plays in the running game, as you've seen with Bars and Mustafa, who are mobile in terms of their lower body, little lighter offensive linemen, but not necessarily strong. Like we saw with Montgomery's touchdown, they're able to, hey Cosmo, how you doing? They're able to create holes through being in the right place and getting in the way of blocking assignments, much more so than they are just blowing holes open. But at this point, I think you guys can agree, the Bears offensive line will take whatever it gets. Now, this has definitely been an improvement over where things were. And it's funny you guys talk about, or we talk about that like contact hitter versus power hitter mentality. That's very, very similar to the way Ifedi is compared to, say, I guess kind of Leno, but Ifedi downright blew probably about 4 or 5 blocks, and that was only in like the first half. But hey, a lot of those blown blocks didn't turn into necessarily particularly like nasty plays, and the Bears were able to survive and move on from there. It's not that Ifedi's like a bad tackle. Well, that's the trouble, right? It's like, is he depth level? Sure. Like, is he better than Jason Spriggs? I think so. I think he's a little better than Spriggs. Is he good? Well, probably not. But Bobby Massey's the starter for a reason. And frankly, Ifedi's supposed to be the right guard, but I think that the Bears realized that they weren't going to play Bars at tackle, so they needed to play somebody. Coward wasn't working, so they switched to Ifedi, and, I mean, Mitch has benefited greatly from that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, again, I am a Bears fan first. Seriously, I'm a Bears fan first. And the reason that I bring that up is because sometimes I'm sure it could sound like I want Nick Foles to succeed. And the trouble that I have, at least with this, is that I worry about Mitch playing against higher tier opponents. But, I mean, it doesn't really matter because the Bears go and they play the Vikings, who are a very mediocre opponent, especially on offense. On defense, they're okay, and it'll be a good test for this new Bears offense. But I mean, either way, I'm cheering for the Bears to succeed, whether now or in the future, and especially against like Jacksonville, especially against Houston, and so on and so forth. Let me put it this way. I don't think Foles beats Detroit either. 34 points against is pretty much going to sink Foles' boat in any case. Take a look at the Carolina win that we had. Like, Nick Foles on a good day is going to generate you like 23 points. And the question is, can he generate those points against, what is it, or can Foles generate them against the Saints? Maybe. Can he generate them against the Buccaneers? Maybe. Can Mitch generate that same point total against the Buccaneers or the Saints? Who knows? Tough to tell. Those are like the number 3 and the number 2 defense per DVOA. But against the bad teams, like I think you guys have seen, against bad teams like Carolina, Foles scores the same amount. It's not like he starts blowing up against lower tier opponents like Mitch does, because Mitch has athleticism, Mitch has the ability to throw on the run, Mitch has play action and a decent running game booing him against some of these bad defenses. Nick Foles is still a statue in the pocket, and even the Texans, who have a fairly depleted defensive line, can sack a guy who, when Sam Mustipher gives up that kind of inside pressure, like, he's going to get blown up by somebody cutting straight down the middle, whereas Mitch actually did a couple times throughout the game evade that interior pressure, though there were 2 situations, the first 2 sacks, where David Montgomery's blocks were very, very lackluster, and therefore Mitch took a sack from it. But so I think that's where it gets complicated. Right, Akusa, you're absolutely right that Foles gets sacked at a lower rate than Mitch, 100%. But the key of what I think I'm trying to get at here is that pressure will blow up more plays. Foles is good about getting the ball in a direction that makes it an incomplete pass. Just take a look at the play that he got injured on, but it wasn't a good play. It was just not a bad play. And Foles' ability to generate those good plays, I think, has gotten limited by the fact that behind an offensive line that is, even with the current improvements, it's not like good. It's just not horrible. And I think we're all probably in agreement there. I don't think that's necessarily a recipe for Foles' success. Basically, if you guys think about it this way, this is how I would think about it. if Tom Brady or Phillip Rivers wouldn't really be successful behind this offensive line, Nick Foles is definitely not going to be. And in these cases, I think Rivers would struggle. It's always hard to tell with Brady, but certainly other immobile quarterbacks probably wouldn't have a ton of success either. It's part of why their offensive lines are as beefy as they are. Foles is not, so Mitch is probably the play for now. Now, in terms of like, what do you do with Mitch in the future? I think it's a good question. And like you're saying, June Flight, I definitely think it's possible to make the playoffs. I just don't know what the Bears are going to do in the playoffs. I was playing with the playoff predictor, and I planned on showing you guys this. I mean, there are tons of situations where the Bears can make the playoffs because the NFL's a weird beast, right? The Bears, the Vikings, and the Cardinals are in the lead for that 7th spot in the NFC, based on what I have seen anyways. And then the 49ers are kind of in the mix, but I don't think that they're going to win enough games to really matter in this competition. But that's just my take. So if Arizona wins 2 out of their next 3, and then the Bears win all 3, I think the Bears are in. I'm going entirely off of memory, but I think that's the case. And if the Bears win all 3 games, I mean, like, YOLO, yeah, they're getting in. Because I don't think Arizona, who's just as up and down as we are, to say the least, is going to win all 3 of their games. The trouble is that I don't think the Bears... I mean, it'll all depend on whether the Packers have that 1 seed locked up, right? At the moment, they're still competing with the Saints. I know the Saints are all over the place on who they are or aren't going to be playing at quarterback in the next week, but we'll see what happens there. At the moment, as long as they're competitive with the Saints, they're going to come out to try to win. And Derek, I don't know, or I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona loses to the Eagles. Okay, I probably would be. I would still be surprised. I really like Kyler Murray and a lot of what the Arizona Cardinals can do on offense, but I think you guys have seen enough of my content to know that I can get pretty smitten with what people can do and sometimes can stay blind to what people are doing. Does that make sense? Because I do think that's a blind spot of mine, is I can envision the potential and not look at the momentary. But the point is that, like you're saying, John, Arizona still has to play the Rams just like we still have to play the Packers, and that makes this next game against the Vikings a really, really big one. If the Bears can beat the Vikings, honestly, the playoffs are like very on the table, especially if they were able to beat the Lions. But I mean, hey, there you go. Not everybody gets to win. But so at that point, then the question becomes, what do you want to do for the future? I want to open this up to the chat. I've seen some people say, let's extend Mitch. I know there are other people that are like, no, anything but that. And Foles is the only quarterback that the Bears currently have under contract. The question becomes, right? So the Bears beat the Texans. And if you guys haven't noticed, the one thing that I haven't said is tank. The one word that I haven't said yet is tank. Because if you guys remember, or not if you guys remember, I was looking at this, right? Let's say that the Bears beat the Jags, just the Jags. They're going to be a 7-win team, and they're almost 100% going to draft around 15th, 16th. If you ask me, that's going to be really hard to grab like a Zach Wilson or a Trey Lance, and that's even assuming that Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence are out of the picture. So at that point, how do you reset at the top? Do you reset with like Mac Jones? Do you reset with Kyle Trask? I mean, you could, but there's a decent chance that Mitch Trubisky in this awesome game against the Texans that was fun to watch because the Bears succeeded might have killed our shot at actually resetting a quarterback this next year. What that means, and I'm just talking, so again, like, feel free to agree, disagree, anything in between, is that this might set up a decent year to take an offensive tackle at that like first position, go to the second round, draft the best offensive player available, even if it's another guard or tackle. So you might replace both tackles in a single year, and then you roll out the next season with, believe it or not, Nick Foles. And you may say, well, why not Trubisky? Because at that point, you're probably trying to lose your games. Like, unironically, you're probably trying at that point to lose some games because you do eventually need a quarterback, right? And that's the complicated part of all this, is you eventually need a high enough pick to take a franchise-changing quarterback, but you're also going to need to take an offensive tackle in the first round because based on every study that I've ever done, like, sure, Charles Leno is paid at about as good as he is. He's the 23rd highest paid, sometimes 25th, depending on what metric you use, highest paid tackle in the NFL, and that's about where he is. But you can't do that forever. Eventually, you've got to take a new left tackle, and in almost all situations, you need to get them in the first round, or they're not able to perform at that level that you want them. Guys like Cam Robinson in Jacksonville are great examples of what happens when you try to use a second round left tackle, and they're not great guys. Like Titus Howard, another great example. They even kicked him over to right tackle in Houston. There are a lot of these guys where they want, what is it? They want to find a left tackle in the second round, but in the modern NFL, I don't see it. Mike McGlinchey is a much more common story where you take him in the mid-first and he can produce for you at left tackle like he has for the 49ers, and it might actually be a pretty decent strategy here for the Bears, even if that involves kind of taking a 2021 dead year, which, don't get me wrong, like I'm a Bears fan first. I hate the idea of a dead year. That would suck. But at the same time, with the Bears not really in position to draft anybody particularly special at quarterback, I might be the best choice. Because like you guys are talking about, the tackle class is really good. Even if the Bears got the third best tackle, they'd have a very, very good tackle on their roster. And it's complicated, Abe. Like, do they have like good odds at a quarterback? No, they don't. But at the same time, I'm really not a believer in the idea that old franchise history dictates your next franchise like decision. Just because the Bears haven't had a quarterback doesn't mean they won't get a quarterback. It's just a matter of executing a plan with the proper process. At least that's my perspective. And if the Bears can sign Dak Prescott, sure, they should absolutely try to. Like, Dak Prescott, if he shook free, is going to be a bona fide franchise quarterback. But I don't know if they can afford him. I have absolutely no idea. Like, I really don't know. And I'd be curious to see the Bears try, but I don't know if I would go for a reclamation project. Like, I've seen some of y'all talk about, like, Darnold or Rosen or so on and so forth. And sure, the Bears could try them. Like, they definitely could try, but at least for me, I might at that point just roll with Nick Foles and see what you can do, because I don't know if Foles is going to be crazy good, but he shouldn't be crazy bad if the offensive line settles up. But if it doesn't, I totally understand anybody saying, like, no, that's not going to work, like, where things aren't going to get any better. And sure, like, I would be sniffing some serious sunshine to say, like, things are going to get crazy better. But yeah, exactly. Like you're talking about WY. I do think Foles is actually, like, I still believe to this day that Foles is a solid quarterback. Like, I'm trying to pick my words here, right? Like, he can flex up to being a solid quarterback if he's really well protected. And I think the 2017 Super Bowl run showed that. But I also think that if you can't protect Foles, he depreciates very, very, very quickly. If you look at his stint in St. Louis, if you look at his stint in Jacksonville, if you look at his stint in Chicago, when he doesn't have a grade A offensive line, he falls apart, and he kind of always has. And I really think that's kind of the skinny with him. He needs solid weapons. He needs all the things that anybody would say, like, Mitch absolutely needs. But in my opinion, he can be all right. But again, in Chicago, we just didn't have the pieces to make him successful, which frankly casts a lot of doubt on the trade in the first place. I do think that we would have seen a very similar season to I don't know. It's hard to tell when it comes to. I'm seeing some people talking about, like, whether Mitch would have, like, or Mitch has to save the season, and sure, I can see how it looks that way. I'm not sure that Mitch is able to beat Tampa. In fact, I don't think he does. I don't think that, or I don't know if Mitch is quite as competitive against New Orleans, but also things don't get any worse than they did against Tennessee. I think Mitch would have been more competitive there. I'm not sure that he could have beaten the Vikings. Again, we're going to see. We're going to get a great opportunity to know whether Mitch would have succeeded against the Vikings or not in this next Sunday. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to tell. At the end of the day, I totally understand anybody that would say, "Oh my gosh, like, Nick Foles was 2-5," but also it's worth remembering that according to DVOA, Foles' 7-game stint featured 5 starts against top 10 defenses, and then 2 really bad ones that he didn't capitalize on, and that's totally on him. One of them, Carolina, he was like, all right. But yeah, it's it's a tired argument because at the end of the day, I really don't think that this offense is keyed up to play well against good defenses. And the Bears like kind of tried, but we've seen it. I mean, at this point, they are starting to do all the things that high school offenses do: roll the quarterback out, get him in one-on-one or get him in one-on-one situations, get him out of the pocket, make sure that you can taper down their reads. And Mitch has been really successful in those, sure, but he hasn't had to throw the ball like downfield. He hasn't had to read downfield coverage that rotates. He hasn't had to do this and that and the other, or like he hasn't had to do a whole lot of the things that you would qualify as an NFL quarterback. And as we heard the Packers say in 2019, if you can, and I quote, make Mitch play quarterback, you can beat him. And these last two teams, the Lions and the Lions of the Texans, I understand that the Lions didn't, or that they didn't win against the Lions, but the Lions haven't been very good at making Mitch play quarterback either, and the Texans certainly weren't. They smoked him. But yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to kill Trubisky. I do think he plays really, really, really well against these bad defenses. And thankfully for his sake in the 2020 season, he's pretty much only had to play bad defenses, where the best two defenses he's faced are the Giants and the Atlanta Falcons, according to DVOA at least. I was surprised about that too, but even the Packers are like the 20th ranked defense. And at one point that game was 10-41. So there you go. It's interesting you asked that, Marcus. Like, does Mitch struggle when he drops back, and does it? Or hang on, let me read up. Does Mitch struggle when he drops back, and is that because he can't find an open man, especially in zone? It's interesting you asked that. I would say that Trubisky struggles pretty much any time option A is taken away. So think like a Madden player, right? Like if you are playing Madden and you call your play and it's like corners, so you've got the guys running the corner route, the in, up, out route on each side, and one of your receivers is obviously highlighted in red because he's the primary target. You stare at him. You say, that guy is going to get open. Let's say you're playing as the Bears. It's Allen Robinson. You say, I'm going to throw it to Allen Robinson. And if Allen Robinson's open, great play. 17 yards, 20 yards. Good. Your thumbs up. Everybody wins. But if it's not open, how good are you, Madden? And like, how good are you? Are you able to find that second read? Or do you know where your check down is? Is he open? Are you sure? This is the sort of thing where I think Mitch takes a step back. In fact, I think that this has been what defined his career more in 2019, where, at least based on my opinion, again, when that first read is open, when he's able to process the field for lengthy amounts of time and then check it down, he can kick the ball out and guys can make plays with the ball in their hands, like in yards after catch. I mean, there must have been 5 plays in that first half alone where Mitch was able to option the ball out off of play action to guys basically at the line of scrimmage that then went and picked up minimum 8, maximum 13 yards, and that's as easy as it gets. When I look at Mitch, again, like, you take a look at his stats, the guy's like at 110 quarterback rating against defenses that allow over 100 quarterback rating on average. So let me say that again, because I think that was a mouthful. Against defenses that allow an average quarterback rating of 100 plus, Mitch as average since like 2018, a 120 quarterback rating. Again, he smokes. It is the Jonathan Wood chart at Kusai. That's exactly what I'm talking about here. When Mitch plays poor defenses, he pops off. No middle ground. He is outstanding against defenses that aren't very good. And then as soon as he starts to play defenses that allow between an 190 quarterback rating, his quarterback rating drops to about 85. Then when he starts to play defenses that allow less than a 90 quarterback rating, he falls to the, about a 74 on average. So I'm totally just going by quarterback rating, which is not great. But exactly like you guys are talking about, the 2018 Bucks defense is a perfect example. Like, when Mitch is able to execute that first read, somebody post the Wood chart for DJ in the comments. That would be really helpful because I'm out here in the cold. But so when Mitch has that first option available, he smokes people. And like you're saying, Chris, the football team against the Cowboys, he had his first read open constantly, and then he still threw a pick in the end zone off of a read that he missed, which, I mean, hey, there you go. The Cowboys game, he had just about everything open, but he did make quick decisions. RPOs, zone reads. Like against the Cowboys game, he was consistently able to keep going. But then against, or what was it? Or yeah, the Detroit games, he has certainly sauced guys all the time. And then against Detroit this year, put up, what, 27 and 30 points, nothing to sneeze at. The Texans game, he got everything he wanted there in that first half, then drove down, put a ball in A-Rob's hands. Well, not like his hands, because it was a contested catch where Allen Robinson, true 50-50 ball, I'd say, where not the old school 50-50 ball where he's going up for it and nobody else is, but he had a hand in his face, and he tried to catch the ball, didn't catch it. Hey, they happen, and they kicked a field goal. At that point, it was 33-7, and like you guys have heard me say, at 10-41, I'm not turning the game off, but I don't think that the next bunch of plays count for evaluation the same because the game's basically over. Well, when the Bears hit 33-7, the game was basically over. Mitch did everything he had to do. He took the ball off that first half, drove all the way down, and immediately, or what would you say? Like he took the ball in the first half, drove all the way down, gave the Bears a chance to score a touchdown. The touchdown didn't happen, and immediately then the Bears kicked a field goal. Now they're up, what was it? At that point, they was up 26 points. That's 4 possessions, and there you go. Like, that's all he needed. At that point, sure, some people brought up Mitch didn't go crazy in the second half. Well, he did enough in the first. Like, I totally will give him credit. I absolutely will cut Mitch slack for a second half that was, it wasn't phenomenal, but he did his job already. Like, at that point, he was just managing the game and making sure things didn't get out of hand, and the defense didn't let things get out of hand, so there was no problem. I mean, at least to me, I thought Mitch was about as good as you could ask for against this Texans defense. And again, like, all it makes us do is it makes us look at the next Vikings game and say, okay, what you got? I do wonder whether he's going to come back to the Bears. In fact, if I had to guess, I would imagine that his situation is pretty sour, and that unless he didn't get a starting opportunity anywhere else, that he would probably want to leave the team just for a fresh start, get into a new uniform, find a new coach, and go from there. Would not surprise me if his agent, regardless of what, like, again, could Trubisky ever a career resurgence and send me back to the drawing board with a lot to learn? Sure. Like, always open to the possibility. 100%. But at the same time, it's not going to surprise me if, like, Trubisky and his agent are looking at things saying, yeah, things are going to be way better when you get out of Chicago, 100%. And from there, they'd probably go kick to somewhere else, because I would too. Like, I'd want a fresh start if it was me. But so, let me see. What did Akusai just post? Bears are 14-15 in the last 2 years and have beaten 3 teams over 500 in that time, one being the Bucks, one was the Vikings backups, and the other Mitch threw 3 passes. Dang, Akusai, okay. That's what you're talking about. Yeah, that's the thing. I've heard some people say Mitch has played really well against the Vikings, and that's really interesting, because, like, I remember Mitch's first game against the Vikings. It was fine. Anyways, frankly, I don't know. This is so complicated, because I don't think Mitch wants to be in Chicago next year. At least that would be my guess. The Bears turned down his 5th-year option. They basically said in as many words, like, I don't believe in you. And as we saw, whether you want to blame Matt Nagy, you want to blame Ryan Pace, either way, the Bears traded for Foles and took the first excuse that they could get to put him into the game. It's not as if Mitch feels respected and loved by the Chicago coaching staff and front office right now, and I wouldn't blame him for that. Like, again, if it was me and I was Mitch, I wouldn't exactly have any loyalty to the city either. I think Allen Robinson would have more loyalty than Mitch Trubisky, and that's just my opinion. But so the Bears more than likely either have to ride with Foles, which again, at that point you're probably looking at either a really exciting running game with David Montgomery and a whole bunch of lines. I mean, that's the thing, Chris. You know, it felt like the first excuse to me. Like, Mitch threw, what was it? It wasn't his first interception, was it? No, it was his first interception in the second game, or in the third game. So his first interception in back-to-back weeks, and no, it wasn't a good one. But at that point, like all the people had said, like they had, like, they were 2-0 at the time, and they weren't exactly out of the game. And immediately, yeah, Kusai, I mean, Mitch ran it back there and saved the game with the tackle. And sure, Matt Nagy, like, nerves of steel and whatnot for putting Foles in and Foles coming back and winning the game. And it was an exceptional performance in that moment. Do I think Mitch could have done it? Not necessarily, but it's not like everybody replaces their quarterback at the first chance they get. It really did feel, I remember I said so on Bear With Me early. I was shocked it happened when it did. Shocked. Especially coming off of a Giants game where I thought he played really, really well, or at least about as well as I've ever seen Mitch Trubisky play. He was efficient. He was effective. He used head fakes. He used his athleticism. He did just about anything that he necessarily needed to do. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens from there. John talked about it. Pace tried for Brady. Pace wanted to replace him, had no faith in him, even though he was the one that drafted him. I mean, yeah. I mean, all reports are that the Bears were active in the quarterback market and, frankly, even tried to sell Teddy Bridgewater on jumping in and being the Bears' bridge, which didn't happen. But, hey, there you go. I don't think Foles should necessarily be cut. It doesn't help the Bears to cut him. I'm not trying to be some kind of like Foles should start guy. If he does start, it's purely because he's the only quarterback on the roster, and that's if I would love the Bears to take a quarterback this year. I don't think they'll take him with that first pick again, especially if they beat the Jaguars, which I think is more than likely. But I do think that I would love to see them take like a Riddler kind of guy in the third or fourth round, somebody with talent that might need just a little bit of refining, a total lottery pick, right? Because what you would love to see is the Bears find the next Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Derek Carr, like a later round guy that really blossoms into somebody. But for that to be the case, you got to take a traitsy guy and hope that something clicks. And at that point, you're probably sitting somebody on the bench and you're probably sitting them on the bench and letting the other guy play, the other guy in this case being Foles. And unless the Bears invest significantly in their offensive line, I don't see that going any better. One thing that I do think is interesting is, so somebody talked about like firings. Does this change things? Well, I think we'll have to see, right? Because DJ, I like that. Some guy named Tom from the 6th round. But so I think that if it was me, right, I wouldn't let one huge win over the Texans change this season. This season was an all-in season. This season was a season that was built around, hey, you know what? We're going to blame that whole 2019 fiasco on our quarterback. It was all Mitch's fault. Us and our offense, well, we fired the guy we fired Harry Hiestand, the guy who was the problem of it all. We fired we fired Mark Helfrich, and instead we brought in Bill Lazor. We brought in John DeFilippo. We brought in like the best offensive minds in football, and we're gonna really get this thing working. You know what I mean? Like, that was the approach that the Bears had to this offense, and it has not worked. Like, we could take a look at this between like the Mitch and the Foles games, sure, if you really wanted to, but the fact is, as much as I don't love the way that some people deliver it, all the points that American made earlier in the chat aren't like invalid. The Bears could not score consistently with Nick Foles, and sure, again, they beat a Buccaneers team that I don't necessarily think that they beat otherwise, but they also lost to a Tennessee team that did not play well on offense that day. They lost to a Vikings team that I don't think deserved to win. Certainly, they lost to a Rams team that had started well, but they weren't crazy good. They lost to a New Orleans team that they, at that moment, easily could have beat. Like, there were a whole bunch of these games that you look at that were not good, not shining moments for the Chicago Bears, and I do think that a lot of it falls on the offensive staff. Well, you already fired the offensive coordinator, so if you're going to make personnel changes, like in that coaching room, you're probably firing Nagy. Well, in my opinion, if Trubisky ends up on another team next year and you fired Nagy, what's the argument for keeping, and that's the thing, like John said it, I do want to harp on this, I think this matters, that the Vikings game was Foles' worst game of the year. And Foles isn't going to be perfect in every game. You go back to 2017, he had a horrible game against the, at the moment, Oakland Raiders. He had a horrible game the next year. I think it was week 1 against Atlanta. Like, Foles is due for a stinker or two if you give him enough games, and that was kind of his stinker. And at least that's what I think happened. But so the trouble is, and I'm sure you can feel me building up to it, if Ryan Pace hired the coach in John Fox, and he was fired after 3 years, and then Ryan Pace hired the next coach, Matt Nagy, and he was fired after 3 years, and Ryan Pace traded up to draft the quarterback, and he was gone without his 5th-year option picked up. Why not move on? Like, why not reset everything? You know what I mean? And well, Elon, Mark Trestman had nothing to do with pace, so that's the only reason I didn't bring him up. Like, the complicated thing here is that I get why people would look at pace and they'd say Jalen Johnson, they'd say Roquan Smith, they'd say Akeem Hicks, they'd say Khalil Mack trade, they'd say Cody Whitehair, Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, probably not Anthony Miller, probably nobody's saying Anthony Miller, David Montgomery. Like, there are a whole bunch of things we could point to and say, hey, that's not so bad. Like, that, you know what? Ryan Pace hasn't been, like, awful. But at the same time, the most important things, like the flagship decisions for the franchise, I would say, Ryan Pace has kind of botched them all. And I don't really know how well you would credit him for everything, or certainly how much you'd try to keep him. But exactly like you're talking about, David, the trouble here is, so I want to speak on that. I think that's really key, right? You talk about how Ryan Pace like gets a lot of credit for making one of the NFL's best defenses. He definitely does. But also, it's worth remembering that the Chicago Bears spend the second most on defense in the NFL. And Adrian, I am out on my balcony. That's my apartment right there where my internet has been out for the last hour. So I am out here in the 30-degree Dallas, Texas. Wonderful, wonderful weather. And we are just surviving and thriving. But so anyways, the Chicago Bears spend the second most on their defense, which is really interesting, right? Because that sets expectations, and so like, or when they're tripping over my words, when the Bears are spending more than everybody but the Broncos, interestingly enough, it's Vic Fangio's team that spends first most on defense. When they're spending more than everybody else, you'd expect high-level production, right? You'd expect good play from Akeem Hicks, Robert Quinn, Khalil Mack, Eddie Jackson, Kyle Fuller, so on and so forth. You'd expect all that. And no, I get you. It's cold, but I think I'm fine. I've got a nice insulated jacket. Trust me, I won't push myself too hard. I just want to make sure we get a good stream in. I care about y'all. But so, anyways, when you look at what the defense is spending, you look at you then see the results that the Bears are getting, and at the moment they're, I think, like 12th in DVOA. And look, I'm not going to be the guy who tries to say the Bears aren't getting enough out of their defense. Like, sure, you could go down that route, and they're definitely not getting enough out of Robert Quinn. They're probably not getting enough out of Eddie Jackson at the moment. Like, there's a whole lot of things that I could talk about there, but the point is that Ryan Pace paid that diamond ring price, and you can't. So that means you can't necessarily credit him for the diamond ring. Like, most of these GMs that get a whole lot of credit for the offense are either, like in Kansas City's case, loaded with stars, winning games because of it, like just dominating people because they have Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes, as well as a slew of others like N'Keal Harry that are just awesome players that aren't getting paid anything, as well as like Mitchell Schwartz and other players on their offensive line. You guys get the idea. You can compliment the Chiefs for that because they may win a second Super Bowl off of the back of just that one offense. And at that point, you can spend whatever you want on it. The trouble here is Mecole Hardman. That's what I was trying to go for. Thank you. I get them confused all the time for some reason. N'Keal Harry's a Patriots receiver, right? Don't know where that comes from. But so, anyways. The point here is that the Bears spend enough on defense that while I do credit them for having a good defense, like they wouldn't win as many games as they did at this point without him, they're definitely spending for it. And their offense can't get out of the cellar, partially because they are one of the cheaper offenses in the NFL. The Bears actually spend only about 35% of their cap on the offense, and they definitely play like it. So I would love to see a little more resource invested in the offense. And if you asked me, again, like even if the Bears go on some crazy late season tirade against a Vikings team that doesn't show up, and a Jacksonville squad that has one win, and a Packers team that's resting its starters, and they squeeze their way into the playoffs, I don't know, maybe I'm just jaded, but I'm definitely ready for a change at the top, like in terms of GM. I'm definitely ready for a swap in terms of how we are managing our team. I don't mind a change at head coach, sir, we can do that, but I also look at this team and I say, Why in the world was Rashad Coward on the roster? Like, who kept him there? Why in the world was our next best backup like Alex Barr, Sam Mustipher, who, sure, they're those contact hitters that we talked about, and maybe to that I credit them for having evaluated their own talent, but at the same time, they continually put Coward into the lineup over Bars, over, like, not over Ifedi, but over anybody else. Coward was their sixth offensive lineman, and he almost single-handedly tanked the whole offensive line. Like, it's so complicated to talk about, right? Where it's like, this roster feels to me anyways like it has been mismanaged for a little while, and I just don't know what to do about it. And like you're talking about, Joe, the Bears were absolutely going with the plan of buying an amazing defense and getting the most out of a rookie quarterback, but then then the Bears didn't get what they wanted out of Mitch, and things kind of fell apart. And the worst part is, Jack, like you're talking about, the Bears got a good long tryout with Coward. I was telling you guys last year, there's a video of me in the offseason talking about how Rashad Coward is bad and it's good to see him replaced, and then there he was as this first guy off the bench. I don't know who thought of that. Not to mention, the Bears decided that they'd rather get Robert Quinn, who, sure, it didn't work out. And sure, I made a big video on the Rule of Three that I don't regret making because it got like 170,000 views and put me on the map, and I'm okay with that. Like, unfortunately, I'll take the win. I'll take the win and the loss. But I then look at, like, Robert Quinn, and I think to myself, well, why couldn't that have been a right guard? Like, imagine if that had been a right guard with Germain Ifedi as the sixth offensive line off the bench. Well, for an offense that was going to struggle and then immediately dealt with the James Daniels injury, that would be really good news, wouldn't it? Like, at the moment, we are dealing right now, we are dealing with Charles Leno as the only starter in the Bears offensive line that hasn't moved positions and has played the whole season. Cody Whitehair has dealt with injuries. So Cody Whitehair's dealt with injuries. Germain Ifedi moved from a struggling right guard to a struggling right tackle, and now Cody's finally finding his footing as the Bears play their backup center and their backup right guard. Because Coward technically counts as the backup right guard. Any way you slice it, he's had too much game time. And that's wild. You guys talk about, like, Jack Conklin. Another option would have been, was it Glasgow? He was on the market. He definitely cost a pretty penny, but he's been solid where he's at. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of this stuff where I look at the Bears situation, and I understand Bears fans that want to keep Ryan Pace, but I think you've got rose-colored glasses on, and I mean that as respectfully as I can say it, because there have been a lot of problems with the roster where if you did want to look at Matt Nagy and his offense and so on and so forth, if you wanted to make the argument that they haven't had a ton to work with, you could make it. Is it a strong one? Not necessarily. I feel like I've done a good, fair-handed job of criticizing the Bears offense, like, consistently, especially from an execution standpoint. Things like that screen only just started to happen, and I don't know whether the team just rallied around and believed in Mitch. I don't know whether the Bears scored enough touchdowns that the offense started to believe in themselves. Like, I don't know what created the change. I'm just glad that something did, because the Bears offense is executing as if they think they can win games, which is great. And from there, they have succeeded a lot more. And who knows? Like, seriously, there's a decent chance that confidence alone could make them competitive against a Vikings team that should probably be a little better than them, but they may not be on offense because Mitch has the team believing. And I don't think that there's any way to look at this team and say otherwise. He absolutely has this team thinking that they can really go somewhere. Maybe not like really, really go somewhere, but at least win some games. And the offense is firing, and it is fun to watch. A little bizarre because it looks easy, and I wish it had looked this easy in week 1. I wish it had looked this easy in week 2. I wish it had looked this easy in any of the other stuff, but I mean, hey, there you go. But exactly like you're talking about, Joe, I think you're saying this. So it's got to be everyone. Yes. It's got to be everyone. The GM needs to handpick his coach, who handpicks a quarterback, and so on and so forth. There's this chain of firing, as I've heard it described, right? Where the first to go is the quarterback, Mitch Trubisky went. The next to go is the coach, that would be Matt Nagy. The next to go is the GM. Well, if you think about Ryan Pace's career, like, in the whole, it started at John Fox, and then he got his quarterback, and then John Fox left, and he got Matt Nagy, and then Mitch got benched, and Nagy got is probably on the outs, and then to me at least that means that that Ryan Pace ought to be on the chopping block. And the next GM could come in, pick their own head coach. That head coach could survey the landscape, find a quarterback of their choosing, and the Bears could rebuild from there. That's at least my opinion. It's the way I would do it personally. Again, I think that there are contracts like the Jimmy Graham contract, contracts like the Robert Quinn contract that I don't think that I think show that Pace has consistently overpaid for the players that he wants to draft. Anthony Miller trading up is a great example. Even the Khalil Mack trade, like more or less a first round pick and another major one. Like the Bears got a second round pick as a kickback, but a lot of draft capital and then a whole lot of cap capital. Like I love Khalil Mack too, but I think we can all agree that in 2020, having an elite edge rusher versus having like a fast linebacker that can get around the edge, they're kind of different. Interior pressure is in, whereas edge pressure is a little on the outs now, with guys more like Aaron Donald, Vita Vea dominating. Chris Jones, like all these guys are the household names, whereas the Shaq Barretts, the Khalil Macks, the Von Millers, and so on and so forth have faded into the background a little bit as holding is more and more legal than ever. It certainly seems to be hurting edge protection, and it's not great to have a whole bunch of cap invested in. Now, and granted, like that's just my take. I'm still trying to figure a lot of this out just like y'all are, but it's at least what I've seen. But yeah, it's complicated. Or at least when I look at the rest of this, that's the thing. Exactly like you're saying, Joe. If Mitch Trubisky, like, let's swap it, right? Let's say he traded up for Deshaun Watson and made all the same moves. I really do think it is that simple sometimes. Like, sure, 100%. I don't think it's a fair world, but like that Mitch, whether you want to use the big old capital B bust word or you want to say it just didn't work out, like pick whatever you want to say, but the results weren't there. The 2019 season stunk. This 2020 season has been a bummer, but yeah, it's the sort of thing where if he takes Deshaun Watson, the Bears, I don't know if they win a Super Bowl, but they probably win at least a playoff game, maybe an NFC championship, and then Ryan Pace gets a big old extension, and there's no problem forever. That's where things get so funny, at least to me, where you look at all that and you say, sure, Deshaun Watson's not like the perfect quarterback either. He's more than likely the new standard of good, but he's probably not. I don't know. I've heard a lot of people say, like, Watson is elite. You know what I mean? And I think it's complicated because you look at elite nowadays, and I don't know if you guys think the same thing I do, but I see, like, Patrick Mahomes, I see Russell Wilson, then there's this echelon of good quarterbacks. Like, Phillip Rivers is good on good days. Tom Brady can play really well. Drew Brees he certainly picked us apart, and so on and so forth. But I look at Deshaun Watson, and Watson really struggled against the Bears. But at the same time, when he's got weapons, like even just Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, he's able to tear people apart. When a lot of these older guys retire or take a step back, Aaron Rodgers looks just as young as ever right now in his play, but that can't last forever. The guy just turned 37. So when Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan and, when Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, Tom Brady, and Drew Brees and others are all out of the league, I think all of a sudden Watson's going to look even better. Like, you're talking about guys that, you're talking about losing 5 of the league's best quarterbacks, even depending on where you rank them. 5 of the at least top 20 quarterbacks, and everybody gets to move up a bunch of slots. That's where all of a sudden, to me at least, Dak Prescott starts to look better and better. It's not even that he's necessarily amazing right now, but he's really good, and the standard for everything's about to drop. At least that's what I'm seeing. And like somebody said, I totally agree with you. I think it's David. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Let me know. But yeah, at least one thing that I try to fix is that I see so many people that want to say, player good, player sucks. Player good, player sucks. And with a lot of these guys, I don't think that's fair. Seriously, Mitch looks amazing, plays amazing against bad defenses. He rips them up, and he really struggles against teams that can move him off his first route. It's like an undercharged Justin Herbert, in my opinion. That's a little more conservative, but I don't want that to sound like I hate I hate Mitch Trubisky. I think Mitch Trubisky sucks. I think he has no place in the NFL. I don't think it's fair. I don't think that's true either. I think Mitch Trubisky is a perfectly okay quarterback that might just not be quite good enough to maintain a starting team. That's the thing. Like it's so funny where you say that, Chris. Like if you can only beat sucky teams, you kind of suck. Well, if you take a look at like Nick Foles and so I'm going to name a bunch of names. This is what I believe. Again, feel free to disagree. If you take a look at Case Keenum's career, Nick Foles' career, and Ryan Fitzpatrick's career, you see a bunch of guys that have been anywhere between the 24th best starter in the league and like the 16th, maybe 14th best starter in the league at some point in their career, but they float around all over the place because what they definitely aren't going to be is a top 12 starter in the league. Ryan Fitzpatrick has had his day on the Dolphins. Nick Foles won a Super Bowl. Case Keenum went to an NFC Championship, and I think all these guys are perfectly okay system quarterbacks, but what they're not is that top end, you're the guy candidate. They are a bridge at best, and at worst, they're a backup. And they've floated around the league doing that for their entire career. Now, why do I say all this? I say all this because Mitch Trubisky, in my opinion, probably isn't the guy. I don't think anybody's thinking he's going to be the guy. It's much more like, Marcus Mariota, where Mariota is now a backup. We haven't heard from him in a year because Derek Carr is popping off. And Mitch Trubisky's probably going to do the same thing. He'll probably become a backup. He'll go somewhere else, and who knows how long his career will be, but at this moment in the league, if you aren't a potential franchise quarterback, you're treated extremely differently from the guys who are. Guys like Baker Mayfield, who have been playing really well in a play-action system that doesn't necessarily, like, require him to do a ton, in that play-action system, Baker looks like maybe he's a franchise guy, but honestly, I look at the fact that he kind of reminds me of Goff in that he's blossoming in a Stefanski system that's making him look better than he is. Jared Goff's another great example of that. Is he truly a franchise level talent? Well, he's like a supercharged Mitch Trubisky. When option A is open, he will hit it. He'll nail it. When option A is closed, he kind of freaks out. Like, nowadays he has developed in now his 5th year to moving on to a second option. Finally, he can play a second option, but he's not very good in pressure even still, just very accurate otherwise. And like you're saying, DJ, Baker's got a crazy running game. So you look at all these guys. Daniel Jones, another example. Sam Darnold, another example. All these guys, they get these really, really, really long leashes where they can kind of do whatever they want because they are potential franchise guys. And man, you say that. Oh yeah, I totally get what you mean now, Derek. I thought you were saying that he's in a bad coaching situation now, but Stefanski's good, and he's coaching extremely well. And like you're saying, Nikhil, Jared Goff really is like Mitch that took that extra step and then he regressed back to Mitch. I see what you mean, but I do think Jared Goff at the moment is really good at delivering. What I would say about Goff, like the best thing I could say about him, where I think I missed on Goff, because after the Super Bowl, I thought Goff was flat out awful. The truth is a little more, as we kind of talked about, like really good, really bad. The truth's more in the middle. Jared Goff, when you give him time in the pocket, like just enough to make a clean throw, he is extremely accurate. I hope the stream didn't die, John. Let me know if it did. But if Jared Goff gets that ability, like somebody to throw to, he will smoke the target. He's the kind of guy that I could legitimately trust to put a ball in somebody's hands in what they used to call a football-sized window, even up to 35 yards downfield. Goff doesn't really miss, but that only happens if he's got a clean pocket, which is why the Rams have invested so heavily in offensive line, and it only happens if he's got an open receiver, which is why the Rams have invested so much in weapons. And sure, it's kind of all falling apart now because the cap situation is a nightmare for the Rams. But to give them some credit, it kind of worked. Like, it worked in the sense that they got just enough to make Goff successful. But then you look at a lot of these other guys, right? You look at the guys that are struggling, or were struggling. Josh Allen gets his 4 years, and here he is. Year 1, super inaccurate. Year 2, super inaccurate. Year 3, crazy accurate. I don't know what changed. Like, seriously, Josh Allen has had an utterly unprecedented growth in terms of his accuracy. Like, he has stepped forward and started hitting targets downfield in a way that he could not do the first couple years. And maybe it gives some hope for Mitch Trubisky, but ultimately, this is going to sound weird. And maybe, who knows? Maybe I'm biased. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out, just like the guys at PFF, just like the guys on Pro Football Talk, just like anybody is trying to figure out what in the world changed with Josh Allen. I would say it's even more evidence that after about year 3 as a quarterback, you know who a guy is. Like, those first 3 years, all bets are off. But after about 3, you've probably got a good idea of who a guy is. So again, maybe Mitch can develop, but is it worth the investment for the Bears? Probably not. Is it likely that he turns things around? I don't think it's crazy likely. Again, maybe, but I would prefer to move on, maybe just to even, like, change up things for the franchise. But if you gave me a choice between Mitch Trubisky and Allen Robinson, I would prefer to keep Allen Robinson, and I hope everybody here can understand that, though I'm curious to hear what your choice would be, because the trouble is that anytime you're negotiating over a starting quarterback deal, somebody mentioned this earlier, the floor is around like $18-20 million, and that's where things get weird. I don't know if Mitch would take a deal to like play for $10 million in the Bears uniform with even different coaches. I just have no idea like what that contract would look like. My guess would be he wants to get out of Chicago as fast as he can, but that's just my opinion. Let's see. Talking about Rodgers is really good, and other than the Rams, yeah. I mean, the Rams, or talking about the Rams is like talking about the Rams is complicated because they are definitely a flawed team. I think the Rams defense is really good, and the Rams offense has a lot of things going for it. Certainly Cam Akers is a fun back to watch. That's what's so funny about running backs, right? Like, you watch David Montgomery, and I've seen some people call him like one of the best backs in the league, and I think it's hilarious because it's not that David Montgomery is bad, and I would never slander one of my favorite current players on the Bears, but there are a lot of good running backs in the NFL, like a lot, and I think that's so funny to look at, right? And just like you're saying, DJ, you're talking about something that I think is really important, right? The full rebuild year is a tough pill to swallow. So hard. I don't really want to do that. But because that's 19 months of our football lives that we basically just have to wait around for the Bears to finally, like, turn things around. But at the same time, remember that, like, Ryan Pace basically pushed everything into the future, and they pushed everything into the future, and you almost wonder how the Bears are going to get their cap healthy without a year to kind of figure things out. But Adrian says 19 months. I tried 35 years. I get what you mean, but what I'm saying is, like, once the season ends, we have a 7-month off season, then we have a whole nother season plus off season, and then the Bears might be competitive. But yeah, like you're talking about, Jack, running back value is just goofy to watch because, like, Cam Akers, again, really good back, bringing one up. And then you look at the Tony Pollard, Zeke Elliott thing in Dallas, and that's just another classic example. Like, there are a whole bunch of these guys that are very, very, very good running backs, but it's very hard to pay these running backs. So I look at David Montgomery. At that point, it would mean that the Bears have roughly 2 years left with him before they move on from him. I don't think that's a bad decision. So the question is, like, what do you do with him then? And we kind of talked about this, but, like, if the Bears invest a ton in offensive line, I think Montgomery plays a lot better. We talked about earlier, like, what happens when Montgomery gets just enough of a lane to squeeze out some yardage, and he can go make serious plays at the second level. So at that point, let's say, all right, here's a question, right? Let's say, for the sake of argument, that the Bears get 2 tackles, and they're both good, which would be wild, right? That would be wild. But let's say they go left tackle in the first round, and that rookie's good. And they go right tackle in the second round, and that rookie's good. And then they sign a right guard, sure, and he's good. And so, or he's just all right. And then the Bears put Daniels at center, and he performs solid, maybe not incredible, but solid. Cody Whitehair performs well at left guard, and again, so now they've got an overhauled offensive line, okay?
And let's say that from there, the Bears tag Allen Robinson and then negotiate a deal with him. So they've got Allen Robinson, they've got Anthony Miller, they've got Cole Kmet, they've got Tariq Cohen, David Montgomery, and Darnell Mooney. And a fully new offensive line with Nick Foles at quarterback. You know, this is going to sound ridiculous, but that offense is a dramatic improvement over this offense. And I don't know if they'd be bad enough to totally tank. Like, that's where I get weird with this whole thing. The defense across from them is going to decay quickly. Like, I didn't know this, but they are did you guys know that the Bears defense is one of the oldest defenses in the NFL? I didn't know that. That freaks me out. But even so, you should expect Kyle Fuller to be pretty solid. You should expect Jalen Johnson to get better. You should expect, hi, honey. You should expect, like, Akeem Hicks to fall off a little bit. You should expect Khalil Mack to probably, I think he could sustain roughly around where he is for, like, one more year before, like, falling off. But a fall off could be around the corner. Even so, the point is that the Bears defense won't be, like, worst in the league. Probably bottom out around average. And the offense across from them would be, I don't know if they'd be average yet. It's wild for me to remember, but, like, the Arizona Cardinals with DeAndre Hopkins, Kenyon Drake, a bad offensive line, Kyler Murray, Andy Isabella, and Larry Fitzgerald are average nowadays. So that's a loaded offensive skill positions that that can't seem to move the ball super consistently. So I can see it all over the place, but at least my guess would be if the Bears could even just fix the offensive line, the running game will get a lot healthier, which helps Nick Foles, who's been really, really, really good on play action this season, if you go take a look at it. And throughout his career, he's been solid off of drop back passing when he's got time, but that's like a big asterisk, in Chicago at least. The point is, say you did all that in an effort to lay the nest for the next quarterback. Is it enough to tank? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it is. I don't know if that team would only win 5 games because there are a lot of bad teams in the NFL and there are a lot of divisional games that go either way. So at that point, like, what do you do? If you're not going to be good enough to tank, or if you're not going to be bad enough to tank, but if you're too good to tank, but you're not good enough to compete, what's next? And like you're saying, WY, it makes me think that we're not going to tank. And I don't know if the GM would go with a full teardown. I don't know. Maybe if you were going to try to make things crazy, you try to trade off what you can, but that would be ridiculous. Let me be clear. If the Bears, right? If, capital I-F, if the Bears sign a new GM and he trades Akeem Hicks and he trades Khalil Mack and he trades Kyle Fuller and he trades everybody that he can, right? If he does all that, I will literally pop up a stream that day and say, we will get through this together. It is the quickest way to the bottom so that you can try to rise back up at the top with a solid choice. But, like you're saying, Akusai, people would lose their minds because we would be flying down to the bottom, and I don't know if people are ready for that kind of speed. But yeah, it's like you guys are, like we're talking about, it is a massive gamble. That's totally true. Like, there's nothing that says that the Jets are just going to get better. There's nothing that says that Nikhil says, well, at least we lost by 1 possession this week. And yeah, I mean, the weekly streams there have gotten weird, especially in a season like that. But it is a massive gamble to, like, go down. I'll tell you that I think Adrian says, like, our recent running game improvements due to the Mitch or the offensive line. I think it's a little more the offensive line, which it's weird to credit a quarterback with success in running the ball. And I mean, maybe it's a thing. Maybe they really are worried about Mitch Trubisky somehow running the ball, but I don't know why they would, because Mitch doesn't run out of any of those formations. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Mustipher and Bars are more likely to take care of their assignment than Rashad Coward and Bars at left guard and Mustipher at center, and there was a whole lot of here and there and this and that. Maybe, like, seriously, maybe Mitch has a role in it. I have no idea, but I will tell you that even against New Orleans, Montgomery was able to pull out a run very similar. Against the Vikings, the Bears were starting to move the ball a little more, and And I don't necessarily think that Mitch is like the answer quite as much as quite as much as the play action stuff that the Bears have been doing recently. As far as Chris asks, as far as mobility goes, is Mitch in the top 10? That's a good question. Let's kind of go down and try to assemble like the most athletic and mobile quarterbacks we can think of and see if we can figure out where Mitch lands. So Kyler Murray, definitely above Mitch. Lamar, definitely above Mitch. Russell Wilson, above Mitch. Mahomes, I think Mahomes is probably at Mitch's level. Josh Allen, above. Watson, above. Let me see. What did you say, David? Mitch played very good with defenders in his face. He actually did. Yeah, he definitely move the ball around. You know, it's funny. I see a lot of people talking about, yes, Daniel Jones is faster. Daniel Jones is definitely quicker than Mitch. I've seen a lot of people talking about Watson, or not Watson. Watson's definitely faster in the pocket. But I've seen a lot of people talking about Mahomes. Mahomes is not that fast. Like, are you saying 4.8 speed like it's quick? Because I'm not trying to dog on Mahomes. Mahomes is just such an athletic talent with his arm that he threatens a whole lot of people and is able to make plays with mobility that isn't crazy special, at least based on what I've seen. So Mitch may be, so Marcus Mariota is not playing anymore. Sam Darnold is definitely not in that category. Rodgers used to be up there. He's not anymore. Let's see. Mahomes is tremendously more athletic, like with his arm. He definitely has a better feel for the pocket, 100%. But we're talking about like just athleticism, I think. But so overall, if I was going to try to just peg Mitch, again, like let me go through. So Burrow, not super athletic. Herbert, definitely more athletic. Let's see, like I'm trying to suddenly, this is where I wish I had my computer so that we could just like look up a bunch of stuff. Mitch and Tannehill are really similar in terms of their athleticism. Stafford probably at or near, closer to the athleticism of Mitch Trubisky than I think people think, but probably less athletic the more that I stew on it. But Slim Jim, I'll tell you what happened. My internet went out, so lucky me. But so, I don't know if Stafford's like a statue, but he's definitely not quick, especially at 31 years old. Point is, if I was going to guess, Mitch Trubisky might be the 9th or 10th fastest quarterback in the league, like most athletic. I think there are a lot of guys that when you combine pocket sense and when you combine ability to make like plays with their feet are either way faster, take Daniel Jones, or like they've got a better feel for it, like Patrick Mahomes. But I look at I think Mitch definitely fits in that like 9th or 10th. The trouble is I don't know how high that is in like the tier system. Yeah, it's funny you talk about the Jones is like 40 because Jones, when he gets up to speed, is booking it. And yeah, like you're saying, David, like one of the hardest things to see in this season was when Foles was bootlegging to try to save himself behind this offensive line. Either way, I can't remember why we started talking about what happened with, or like where Mitch fits in terms of like mobility, but he might, like it's complicated when you talk about a lot of this because what is it? Where I think where I think Mitch has struggled is that yeah, the Jones trip is just hilarious every single time. Where I think Mitch has struggled though is that his pocket sense, so his ability to like feel pressure and figure out where to go with it, isn't that great. But he is solid about like moving technically in the pocket. So yeah. Oh, that's what we were talking about exactly, Derek. Yeah. It's what is it? I really don't know. So what I haven't seen Mitch do is a zone read almost at all, right? I haven't seen Mitch fake that he's going to run the ball. Occasionally he has, but so has Foles. And off of play action in particular, I haven't seen Mitch pull the ball and run it, like just run it. He's usually looking to throw, which makes me think that a lot of the running game increases have been because we've played the Packers, who are terrible at stopping the run. We've played the Lions, who are terrible at stopping the run, and we've played the Texans, who are not very good at stopping the run. So he did, Adrian. I definitely wasn't trying to count the Mitch package that we did run. But so, right, like you're saying, Akusai, then we benched Coward, we moved Ifedi over, and we played all these bad run defenses. And I think that there's reason to believe that it's kind of circumstantial that the running game got better and that Mitch has been able to benefit from it as he went. Now, that's just a hypothesis. I think we'll see against the Vikings game. But even against the Vikings, the Bears were kind of able to move the ball. When they did run it with Foles, and Foles played a really bad game that made sure that the Bears couldn't capitalize on it in the slightest. So, bummer there. But yeah, it's weird talking about did Mitch fix the running game? I think it's more likely that the Bears kind of finally figured it out in terms of the right line combination and the right people to play against. And Montgomery just got cooking, and he has cooked indeed. And that part of this whole thing has been really fun to watch, as has Cole Kmet with the ball in his hands. Also, the defense had a solid game. I thought Tashaun Gibson played a little better. Jalen Johnson had a nice little game himself as he made a couple of big tackles and so on and so forth. Kyle Fuller was solid. I have no idea if Danielle Hunter's back, by the way, Jack. But so let me see. How much of this offseason is complicated if Mitch plays at this level throughout and we're back at the playoffs? Great question, Joe. Let's get there when we get there. And I only say that because part of me doesn't want to let my heart get there. But I do think that if the Bears go 9-7, there's a chance that not Nagy, not Pace, nobody gets fired. And at that point, I have no idea what happens. Maybe the Bears play we got to get our quarterback card, but they already did with Foles. So no idea. We'll just have to see. But at this point, my guess would be, talking about the running game, that this Vikings game, it's going to be a great test. We definitely need the Cardinals to lose this Sunday in terms of the playoff race. And from there, it's just a matter of kind of letting things happen, seeing what happens, going from there. So Gibson, or are you talking about, Travis Gibson. Travis Gibson actually had a nice little rush there at one point, and then he got held like crazy, but it's just one. A couple of his rushes were nice attempts that didn't really go anywhere, but it's nice to see him getting snaps. I mean, it's sort of like a play the kids attitude in the rotation, as it seems like James Vaughters has been subbed out for Travis Gibson, but I'm never going to be upset about the young guy playing. I thought Duke Shelley was incredibly unimpressive. He got burned a couple times here and there, and sure, he didn't get burned like Buster Screen, but it's not exactly as if the Texans had a ton of weapons, and almost any time they tried to call anything long developing, which normally teams have been able to use pretty well against the Bears were able to shut it down because their pressure packages were actually getting home. Another thing I would love to see, I know that this is going to light the comment section up, so just get your pencils and your keyboards ready. I would love to see the Bears blitz 6 guys more often, especially when you see that they're going to sit back in 5-man protection. Blitz them. Blitz Roquan Smith, blitz Danny Trevathan, blitz Duke Shelley, blitz a lot of these guys. Come from out of nowhere and put pressure, because when Khalil Mack is in a one-on-one, he's been murdering people. He's just almost never in a one-on-one. And so I would love to see Roquan used as a blitzer more often. I really think that that's somebody that he is an impact player when he gets to blitz. He's an impact player when he gets to cover. But if you ask him to cover too often, especially for too long, wide receivers are inevitably going to beat him. So they're inevitably going to beat him, and it's just, I would rather see him blitzing than getting beat in coverage, personally. There's a time to drop him in coverage, but what they did on that safety, where they matched Roquan up in what looked like press coverage against the guy across from him, and then he blitzed and helped Mac get home, that was pretty much a perfect play call, in my opinion. Kanger talks about how Screen is another pace miss and we could have paid Bryce Callahan. Maybe. I don't think Screen was that bad for the last 2 years, or for 2019 in particular, and Bryce Callahan certainly would have cost almost double the money, but maybe I'm reading the deals wrong. Certainly I think that's a push more than anything, in my personal opinion, and who knows, maybe Screen bounces back, but at 31 years old, I do doubt it. What is it? Yeah, also, Callahan has been injured a lot. But so I look at, what can the Bears do against Dalvin Cook that other teams can't? How do the Bears always seem to turn him off? The Bears tend to actually play pretty well in terms of gap integrity. The Vikings struggle to crack open inside running lanes against Akeem Hicks. And in this case, Bilal Nichols has been a solid little, interior defender. But, yeah, I mean, at that point, or it's just a matter of, in the Bears case, they tend to do pretty well against inside runs, and when runners start to like play their way outside, they can find a little more success against the Bears traditionally. Ronald Jones certainly punched his way through the Bears defense and ran wild a couple times, as did Adrian Peterson, but it seems like Pagano's scheme, one thing to credit to him, has done a really good job of adjusting to that and shutting it down, with Trevathan playing more of a run hammer look, and guys like, Nichols and Brent Urban helping out against the run a little more than even like John Jenkins and other traditional run stuffers. Credit to the Bears defensive line and their linebackers. They really have played much better against the run later this season than they had earlier. In fact, I wish they were as good as at pass coverage and especially pass rush as they have been against the run, because I would take that trade in an instant, and that's much more along the lines, unfortunately, of what the Packers defense does, and it's not unsuccessful, but it depends on the team. But anyways, it's I think that if they can stop Dalvin Cook, they're going to put the Vikings in a really rough and tumble position. The question is, can they feed off of what they did against the Texans? I don't really know. Certainly, they had 2 weeks in a row where they got pantsed by the Packers and then the Lions. So can the Vikings follow up on that? Good question. I doubt it. If I had to guess, if you're making me guess right now, I would bet this game even. Like, seriously, this could go either way. It feels like one where, like, Mitch could throw an interception that comes back to haunt the team just as much as Kirk Cousins could randomly fumble off of, like, a big Khalil Mack sack that could turn the game around. This feels dead even to me. I don't know if anybody else is feeling like that, but part of it's because the Bears have scored so much that I can't walk in here and say the Bears are going to score 13 points and like put a smile on my face and be like, yeah, I nailed that pick. Like, no, they're cooking with gas right now. Like, at this moment, my guess would be that the Bears are due for about, what do y'all think? I think about between 17 and 23 points, depending on factors. So, like, worst case scenario, 17. Maybe I'm being too high on them. I think this running game at the moment is good enough to allow for play action. That play action can put the Bears down the field. That down the field action can then get them in position where, as we've seen, Mitch is pretty good at throwing fades to Jimmy Graham. The Bears can get the ball to Allen Robinson in the end zone sometimes. And I do think at Kusai that Mitch will likely struggle, but I do think that Mitch could grind out about 17 points. At least I would hope he could. And if can't, I'll try not to be too upset, because I do think that Mitch is almost such a lightning rod that I try to stay cool on the whole conversation, because I don't want to be somebody that just goes and tries to nail the guy. There's no point. Like, he's never done anything wrong for Chicago. Like, he's never not tried. He's never phoned anything in. He's not Cade McNown. Like, I don't disrespect Mitchell Trubisky, regardless of what I think about his play. So we'll see. We'll play the game. Like, and we'll figure out what happens from there. But like you're talking about, Adrian, we have a relatively easy schedule, some offensive momentum. If the Bears can take care of business against the Vikings, I think they carry that into another win against the Jaguars. That'll be hilarious, because Mitchell will have come back, led a 4-game winning streak. The Bears at that point will be, what would we be? Would we be 8-7? Then going into Green Bay, and hopefully, like you're saying, Jack, Green Bay's resting all their starters. Bears get basically a free win, which you never know. They're not free. The Bears beat the Vikings doing the same thing 2 years ago in 2018, but we'll get there when we get there. Certainly, what is it? Wait, what do you mean, Nikhil? Something you saw in a video that was a good reminder is that a lot of players would be the GOAT if it was up to them. Like, explain what you mean, I'm curious. But yeah, maybe in Kusai, Green Bay will do that. Maybe that's exactly what will happen. But we'll see how it goes. At this point, it is it's about 11:20. I think we're at about the point where we'll wrap up this weird backup stream, which, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see if I can't edit these 2 videos together, or at least post this one, but you guys have been troopers. Lights right there, Tyrene. And oh yeah, no, exactly like you're saying, GOAT, or Nikhil, they would be the GOAT if they could be. Of course, Jack, always happy to provide. I will see you guys as soon as we can. Hopefully the internet's working next time, because this was definitely not ideal, but it worked for now, and we got to talk about some football. Feel free to join the Discord server if you're into that sort of thing. A whole lot of people have a whole lot of fun, including myself, just talking about the Bears and other different stuff out there. But yeah, absolutely. Always great talking to you guys. Have a great rest of your night. I definitely will be going and getting warm. And until next time, Bears fans, bear down. And thanks